The big news story of the day, Stefon Diggs traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans for draft pick compensation. That was the first thing that came down from Adam Schefter. It has since been released what the compensation actually is. The Texans have acquired Stefon Diggs and a 2024 sixth-round pick along with a 2025 fifth-round pick. So not only do they get Stefon Diggs, they actually pick up some draft equity in the process. And what did they have to give up? A second-round pick in next year's draft in order to get what we would consider to be one of the top receivers in the NFL. Now, Diggs does bring a hefty price tag with him. 4 years, $75 million contract he brings over to Houston. 18 is guaranteed this year, and he leaves behind $31 million of dead cap to Buffalo. What this tells me is the Buffalo Bills were dying to get this guy out the door, and the Texans are going all the way in to win right now. Is that what's your read on this when you first saw it drop, as far as why this went down and the price tag that went along with it?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a combination, I think, of a lot of different things. But I think first and foremost, it's that the Bills are looking to get Diggs out the door. There's been drama for what seems like since Diggs have arrived because they haven't been able to get over that hump. If we know anything about Stefon Diggs is that he is a competitor. He doesn't want 14 regular season wins. He wants the 2 or 3 in the postseason. That's the type of attitude that he brings. Buffalo wasn't truly able to get there. They weren't able to get by the Mahomes in Kansas City. So that's where I think Buffalo was looking to get him out the door. Houston, it seems like they are set. They didn't rush into this to make this kind of acquisition. Obviously, CJ Stroud a little bit ahead of schedule, but they feel like they're in a position in a division that they can pretty easily claim and make some noise in the playoffs. And they got aggressive. And for all we know, the Bills didn't have another dance partner. That explains the draft compensation going both ways. The Bills are looking to get him out. If there's no one else that has a market for Stefon Diggs, they're taking whatever they could.
So the Texans were already odds-on favorites to win the AFC South. And without even looking at it, I can tell you that it's got to be overwhelming at this point. They went from, as far as Super Bowl odds, they went from something like 22-1 to 10-1 to win the Super Bowl. So I think that's a little aggressive. I like Stefon Diggs. He's obviously a good wide receiver. Something was not going right with Buffalo, but I do think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit on saying that this is the reason that they'd be pushed over the top. The Texans were already going to be a really good team. This makes them a little bit more dangerous, but it also makes them a little bit more volatile. Usually when a team is dying to get rid of a diva wide receiver, it doesn't always work out the way it worked out for your New England Patriots when they acquired Randy Moss back in the day, and you end up getting the best version of that guy. So I do worry a little bit for Houston. They have all this upside, all this great young talent. I worry for them just a little bit that they've added the wrong piece to the puzzle, but this is as it stands right now, this is a great Madden team. I'm just curious to see if the chemistry is impacted by a move like this.
I mean, and a lot of this relies too. We saw more than what we thought we would from CJ Stroud last year. You wonder if it is kind of not a one-hit wonder, but a rookie exceeding expectations just to be met by reality in year 2. Now, from everything that we've seen from Stroud when he was healthy last year, that does not seem the case. It seems that he is going to be ahead of schedule for the next numerous early years of his career. We saw the effect that Stefon Diggs had on Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen, for what we know, is a great quarterback. He didn't become a great quarterback until Stefon Diggs showed up in Buffalo from Minnesota. So
this is true.
This is a big telling year about Josh Allen. One thing that on paper, adding Stefon Diggs only makes CJ Stroud a better receiver or a better quarterback. It only makes second-year receiver Tank Dell a better wide receiver as well. So overall, this seems as a positive for Houston. And for what they got Diggs for, I don't know why you don't bite at it. And I know one happy man is second-year head coach D'Amico Ryans, who already was ahead schedule with his offense as a defensive guy, and now it just got that much better.
Yeah, I mean, look at the weapons they have. They could have made no moves, and you still would have really liked the Texans' offense. CJ Stroud at quarterback, Nico Collins, breakout player last year at wide receiver, Tank Dell, one of the best rookie wide receivers, ahead of schedule in terms of his rehab from his leg injury. And then you add Joe Mixon to the mix. That's an upgrade from Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And then you add Stefon Diggs to the mix. This offense went from good to scary. And if you're looking into the division, okay, the Colts are still taking that steady climb. Got to get more reps to Anthony Richardson. They might surprise people, but I don't think you expect anything too much from a team like that. Then you talk about the Tennessee Titans made all the moves in the world. I don't know, it was sort of random, the moves they make. Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard. They clearly wanted to emphasize speed and being more of an offensively driven team and not slow and plodding in the way that Derrick Henry kind of makes you play in a phone booth. So they made those moves, and it's all going to hinge on the progression of Will Levis. The Jags are supposed to be the big competitors for the Houston Texans in this division, and their weapons right now are Gabe Davis, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne. It's okay. It's nothing special. But if you're a Jags fan right now, you have to be looking at your team and going, "What? Look at what the Texans are doing for CJ Stroud. What are you doing to help Trevor Lawrence?" We haven't even seen Trevor Lawrence truly break out yet. I don't think we feel as good about Trevor as we do about CJ Stroud, and the Jags aren't really doing anything to help him. They made a lot of moves, but not necessarily attacking the, hey, this is the guy that you're going to throw the rock to. It's a little baffling.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit concerning there. I think maybe the hope of Jacksonville, because it seems like this is the time Trevor Lawrence at this point expected to be around the age to be in the point of his career to be entering his prime. Now is where you go out and you get aggressive and you get those weapons to elevate his game that much more, make yourself a true contender in not only your division, but try to go for the conference and try to really make some noise. This was a Jags team that a good start last year, through week 12, 8-3, and then you finish the season 9-8. This was a collapse from Jacksonville last year. They clearly didn't have what they needed to get over that hump, and they lost one of their biggest assets in Calvin Ridley in free agency. So, it's a bit odd for Jacksonville kind of sitting on their hands. I think what maybe they might be really relying on is Trevor Lawrence is still that guy that we all thought he was going to be and what he was grown to be coming into the league. And maybe this activates a competitive chip on Trevor Lawrence's shoulder that us from an outside view just can't quite see.
Yeah, so there's question marks there. There's also question marks when you look at the Buffalo Bills, because they've lost and have not replaced. Their top wide receiver right now might be Curtis Samuel. Dalton Kincaid, who they drafted in the first round last year, would be their number one receiver remaining. If you look at last year's statistics, Stefon Diggs had over 1,100 yards receiving. Gabe Davis had 746. Those were the top two wide receivers. Diggs is with the Texans now. Gabe Davis is with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then it's Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. Those two guys are still on the roster. So your top three receivers, if you're Buffalo entering the season, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel. That is simply not good enough. And I think the world of Josh Allen and what he can do and what he can do with his legs, he can get by with guys like that, but you certainly cap the upside of a Buffalo Bills team without having somebody else there. One other thing that I think this move tells me, and you can look at Buffalo, you can look at Jacksonville, you can look at the LA Chargers as a good example of this. We might see 6 wide receivers go in round 1 this year. I think a lot of these teams have sort of put themselves in a position to go, it's okay, because we're just going to draft the crap out of this position. And I think we could end up seeing 6 guys go in round 1 based on some of the moves these teams have made.
Yeah, I mean, there's no true number right now of how many wide receivers are going to go in the first round, but there's definitely a need for them on some big-time teams around the league. My question for Buffalo is, is this the sign of more moves to come? Buffalo picks 28th in this draft this year in the first round. That'll get you a quality receiver. It might get you the Troy Franklin out of Oregon. You might have to reach up just a tad for him. The McConkey out of Georgia. It can get you one of those guys. But if you're counting on a guy to spend a first-round draft pick on a wide receiver, package that second-round pick that you just got along with some other loose ends that you might have, and maybe you get aggressive and try to trade up into the top 10 to get in a Dunze, a Neighbors if he's slipping down. So I think that might be in Buffalo's future, or they're just going to overly rely on the spectacular Josh Allen that we've seen, who last year threw 29 picks and 18 interceptions, a league high.
Yeah, if you look at the draft order right now, the Chargers sit at 5. The way Jim Harbaugh has been talking, it sounds like he wants to take a tackle, but they need wide receiver help. So, the draft doesn't end after round 1. You can always attack positions later. I think they're a major question mark because of what they need versus what Harbaugh probably wants to do with that team. And then you have the Jags at 17. And by that point, to what you were saying, I think those guys that we look at and go, they could be number 1 wide receivers day 1 in the NFL. By 17, those guys are gone for the most part. Maybe you get like a Brian Thomas. I think he's been catching some buzz. The other LSU wide receivers, not Neighbors. And then Buffalo is at 28. Yeah, somebody's going to need to trade up. Things are going to get wacky on draft day. And I think that these moves tell us that it's kind of like if you look at and I don't think it's an overreaction to say this because the running back market told us the opposite story. All of a sudden, we're looking and going, man, the first day of free agency, there's like 7 running backs that signed these Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard and Derrick Henry signing deals and Saquon Barkley. Why is that? Because this is a really bad running back class. So if you need to fix that position, you look at the draft and go, I can't do it there. You have all these teams with top tier quarterbacks that are just punting on wide receiver in the middle of the offseason. I think it tells you that the draft is about to go. They're about to go crazy for wide receivers. Good for Keon Coleman of Florida State. He might end up a first-round pick because of all of this.
I mean, he was there at points in the season. Coleman was in all of the mocks, and he became a consistent late first-round, early second-round type of guy. So, I mean, shoot, if there's going to be 8, 9, 10 receivers taken in the first round, then you'd like to think that Coleman has to be towards the end there, either at 9 or 10.
Yeah. So this, I'll tie a bow on this, on the Diggs. I think we've covered a number of different angles here to a good degree. What kind of confidence does this give you ultimately as we sit here in early April for what kind of season the Texans are going to have? Would you personally put them up with Kansas City as far as confidence going into the season?
No, that's a that's a
big. I got a laugh out of you on that.
That's what they call a bit of a stretch there, BK. Do I think that they can be there in the end at the AFC Championship game when everything's said and done? Yeah, I absolutely. Kansas City is on another level, and Kansas City remains to be on another level until we see them not finish that strong in the postseason. Regular season, they will be the Miami Heat of the NFL, and even to a higher degree. However they finish in the regular season, if they finish with the 5, 6, 7 losses, okay, can anyone stop them in the playoffs? The second they are dethroned in the postseason, that is when I will not think as highly of Kansas City and think that teams like Houston can make that run.
Yeah, Texans kind of paper champions right now. If you look at the odds, and this is part of the reason why we like talking about this, I think it tells a very interesting story of how we overreact to the new the fresh face in the new place, and then I think we react properly to the team that lost that face. So explain this mathematically. Houston went from 22-1 to win the Super Bowl to 10-1 after the trade. Okay, that's a huge shift. The Bills went from 12-1 to win the Super Bowl to 16-1. Not that different. So why are the Bills not that far off? And now the Texans are almost odds-on favorites. It doesn't really add up. I think we might be, it's an overreaction sort of moment whenever a trade goes down. It's cool. It's definitely going to help Houston. I don't think this is going to be as impactful as the market would tell you right now.
Yeah, I mean, and how impactful does it have to be? We're talking about a team that won the division last year in the Houston Texans, and it was a race with the Jags towards the end because Jacksonville fell apart. Obviously, that impact, and we will really be able to judge that as long as the Texans repeat the success they had last year, which we all assume they will. The postseason is when we'll see, okay, did this Diggs trade truly pay off? It's going to be a long time waiting for that answer. But one thing that we can all pretty much guarantee on paper, it makes the Texans better. And that's a scary thing if you're a Jags fan.
Absolutely. And the fact that we get news like this dropped in our lap on a Wednesday morning is why we love the NFL.